After watching the UFC's Fight Night in Atlantic City this past Saturday, it seems very clear that MMA has a referee problem. We saw 3 straight fights on the main card have some sort of reffing controversy. That should not be happening. I also don't think this is just specific for the UFC. This applies to pretty much every major MMA organization. They're all using the same refs. The commissions are putting the refs out there. But I think at this point, it's a problem. It seems like every week, maybe it's not multiple fights, but there's at least one fight where maybe it's a bad stoppage. Maybe they deducted a point too early. Maybe they didn't deduct a point. Maybe they ruled it a no contest instead of a DQ. It just seems like there's always something, and something should be done at this point. We're going to dive in through the kind of 3 straight fights that had issues this past Saturday, and then kind of expand to maybe potential changes or just how things should operate moving forward. So looking at this Saturday, we're going to start off with the Kyle Nelson-Bill Algeo fight. Gary Copeland was in there as the referee, and this one was pretty much just like the potential early stoppage. I saw some people, they were fine with it. Some people thought it was a little bit too early. I think the issue here, though, is that there's just such a disconnect between different referees, right? Some referees, they are never going to call a fight if fighters are still on their feet, right? They're going to wait until they go down. For Copeland here, you have Bill Algeo, who's clearly hurt. His legs are shaky, but he still seems to be there mentally. He's waving on. He's trying to fire back, and the fight gets stopped. My issue here is that I don't necessarily think it was like a horrible stoppage. I just don't think the fighter should be in a position where different referees are going to handle things differently. If that's Herb Dean in there, I don't think Herb Dean is stopping that fight. If that's Mark Goddard probably is stopping that fight, and I just don't think that's something that's fair to the fighters. We need to see, some more uniform decision-making out of these referees. So that was the first one, and probably like the least controversial one. Even if people thought it was a bad stoppage, that's kind of just where it ends at that point. The fight right after that, we have Nursultan Ruzaboyev taking on Cedrikus Dumas. And this was the fight where Ruzaboyev, pretty obviously, at least on replay, right, pokes Dumas in the eye. Dumas grabs his eye, he kind of turns, looks for the referee to stop the fight, which, I guess technically defend yourself at all times, but if you get poked in the eye, you want to tell the referee, right, because you are entitled to getting some time to recover from that. While he's, trying to find the referee, whatever, holding his eye, Ruzaboyev goes in, finishes him. So pretty much you have an eye poke turning into a knockout. They did rule it as a knockout. Cedrikus Dumas could go out there. He could appeal it. He might win. I don't know if he would win that appeal just because it seems like the commissions are very hesitant to overturn decisions, which is a problem on its own, right? Because Ruzaboyev's getting a knockout that was set up by him doing an illegal foul. The foul led directly to the knockout, and so just from a win-loss perspective, Dumas is getting half of his purse. Ruzaboyev's getting the win that was set up by an illegal eye poke. And then also, I think the fact that kind of gets overlooked here, Dumas took legit damage, right? He got finished, he was busted up, and it all stemmed from an illegal action from Ruzaboyev. Not saying he did it intentionally, but it was an eye poke. Dumas got poked in the eye. He tried to call, for the ref to stop the fight or pause the fight, and he ends up getting finished. He takes a loss. He takes a ton of damage. Just an overall bad situation. I'm not saying the ref is going to see every eye poke. They're not, but ideally you should be in a position to see that when it happens. And then you get into the tough spot, right, where Dumas, he clearly, is making the action like he got poked in the eye. And a lot of the times you'll just see the ref kind of accept that and be like, all right, pause, they got poked, and then maybe they'll go to the replay official, just check to see if that was the case. Now, in some ways that might not work out, right? Say a dude takes a jab, but the knuckle ends up in the eye, and the fighter's like, oh, my eye. If you stop the fight, that could have potentially led to a finishing sequence when they didn't actually get poked. But I feel like more often than not, when a fighter is actually going to their eye, typically they did actually get poked in the eye, so it's a tough situation, but obviously just a terrible result for Cedrikus Dumas. And I will say, if that fight does not get overturned, you're just straight up rewarding someone for committing fouls, which I think has created a serious problem here in MMA across all the promotions. And then the third and final fight that had some controversy here, consecutive fight, was Chris Weidman taking on Bruno Silva. So we had Chris Weidman eye-poking Bruno Silva at least 3 times. Now, 2 of them, Bruno Silva, got poked in the eye, grabbed the eye, the ref stopped the fight or paused the fight, let Bruno Silva recover. Now, I think eye pokes are interesting because they're not always intentional. So should Chris Weidman have been docked a point after the second one? I think personally, yes. I mean, it's a damaging thing. Weidman was also like actively finding his distance with his fingertips straight out. So it's not even like he was trying to avoid it. Sometimes they have the hands up, they swipe it across the face. Seems a little bit more random. But if your fingers are out there the entire time and you poke them twice, I think a point should be taken. The referee doesn't take a point, fine. I think a lot of other referees probably also wouldn't have taken a point. But then we get the finishing sequence where you look back at the replay, Weidman double pokes him in the eye, lands like a slight left hook. Bruno Silva goes down because of the eye pokes. Weidman finishes him. They call it a TKO. Then after they announce it as a TKO, they say, no, it's actually a technical decision, which pretty much means that the fight ended because of the eye poke. So they're going to score the first 2 rounds in the entirety, and then they will score the however long, took place in the 3rd round. That was the decision. So Chris Weidman won 30-27. Now, the fact that they went to the scorecards and after 4 eye pokes, 3 different instances, Chris Weidman was still not deducted a point, to me is crazy. Like, he needed to have a point deducted. Even if he did have the point deducted, he still would have won. But you're also in a situation where you're asking the refs to score a fight where it was back and forth on the feet, and the fight literally ends with Bruno Silva getting ground and pound rained down on him because he's on the ground for eye pokes. So there's no way the judges are going to give him that round. I'm someone who's rooting for Chris Weidman. I thought he looked great. It was great to see him back out there, but you got to feel like Bruno Silva got screwed over in some instance here. A certain number of eye pokes, there's got to, at the very least, be a point taken. Maybe it should have been a no contest. I don't think it should have been a DQ because I don't think it was super intentional. But, you got to control the fingers. And then the thing I do want to mention here about the eye pokes is that the UFC, I talked about how they're not really to blame here because it's the commission, putting up these referees. The UFC are to blame for these eye pokes because Trevor Whitman has a brand of glove. I think it's like ONX, Onyx, something like that. The gloves naturally bend the fingers, so it almost more like it's like accepting your hand to go into a fist, whereas the UFC gloves, they kind of keep your hands out straight. So with Whitman's gloves, if you're trying to find range, your fingertips are going to be pointed down. I think he went to the UFC. The UFC was interested, but they pretty much wanted his patent and they wanted to own the whole thing, which is something Trevor Whitman was not comfortable with. Whitman, if you guys aren't familiar, coaches Justin Gaethje, Rose Namajunas, Kamaru Usman, so one of the best coaches in MMA, and they didn't want those gloves. They wanted all this control over his company, which he didn't want to give up. The fact that they haven't made a change, that's on the UFC because this is causing issues within their fights, and they haven't taken the right steps to fix it. Justin Gaethje even, tweeted pretty much the UFC kind of dropped the ball on not getting the gloves, and, they keep just rolling with the gloves that kind of promote these eye pokes. So that's kind of my thoughts on the 3 things that took place, 3 kind of different unfortunate situations. My overall kind of beef here with the current judging is that there's just no consistency. Every referee deals with stoppages differently. Some guys are going to let it go really long. Others are going to call it early. There's no consistency with taking points. Some referees will let you foul a million times. They'll never take a point. Some referees will take a point pretty quickly. We even saw it with Copeland this weekend. He took a point after 2 groin strikes from Herbert Burns and didn't take a point from Weidman after 4 eye strikes. Now, not necessarily apples to apples there, but like I said, there's just no consistency. There's also no consistency when it comes to ruling something a DQ or no contest. If we remember the Magomed Ankalaev Johnny Walker first fight, where Walker is clearly grounded, there's no reason to believe he's not grounded. Ankalaev blasts a knee into his face, which is completely illegal, and then there was the whole disaster with the commission, the doctor, all of that. But the fact that that was ruled a no contest makes no sense to me. It was a clearly intentional fight that the doctor called off. That should be a DQ, not a no contest. In my opinion, no contest should be reserved for things that the fighter is doing unintentionally, right? If you're trying to throw a knee, like we saw in the Turkali Aslan fight, where I think Turkali threw a knee, he almost hit the dude's face, but his foot came up, hit Aslan in the cup. That's clearly unintentional. Some of the eye pokes are clearly unintentional. That should not be a DQ. But if you are intentionally throwing a strike where you know someone's grounded or they're not moving, you're going to eye gouge them, you're going to bite them, right? Those are situations where that should be a disqualification, and there's just no consistency there. I understand, being the ref is not an easy job at all, but I also just don't think the commissions are doing anything to limit the amount of subjectivity. There's going to be some level of subjectivity just because everything's happening so fast. Everything is a different situation, right? Not all eye pokes are equal, not all groin strikes are equal, but you want to have as much uniformity as possible, and they don't. And the way things are officiated should not vary drastically from ref to ref. It also doesn't help that you throw in that commissions have completely different rules. Grounded knees are always a big issue depending on the commission. Do the refs even know, what the specific rules are for the states they're in? Do the fighters know? Are they telling the fighters beforehand? We had the thing with Arnold Allen, Movsar Evloev, where Arnold Allen was landing those knees on Movsar where he was trying to ground himself. And in Canada, if any part of your hand is down, fingertips, whatever, those are illegal. So Mark Goddard actually made the right call there. But did Arnold Allen know that? Did Movsar Evloev know that? I'm pretty sure in other commissions, it has to be weight-bearing, and those knees could have been legal in other commissions. So the whole thing is all over the place. I just think the goal here for MMA referees should be to officiate the situation as consistently as possible, not having refs each have their own standards. And I think the other big point I want to make here is that refs need to be a little bit more strict with fouls, right? Eye pokes, groin strikes, grabbing the fence is a huge one. These are things where it's almost beneficial to commit these fouls at this point in MMA because you can poke a dude multiple times, you don't get a point taken, their vision's messed up, they're compromised and you're not getting punished at all. You can knee them in the groin a bunch. You can be, getting taken down. Just grab the fence, pull yourself back up, and you're just going to get a little warning. I think the fence grabs are honestly the biggest thing, right? Eye pokes, groin strikes, those can be completely unintentional. There is no such thing as an unintentional grabbing of the fence. If you grab the fence and you're getting taken down, I think that should just be an automatic point. They should just stop them, separate them, bring them to the center, point taken, you grab the fence, because the difference between a takedown and staying up on your feet could easily be the difference between winning the round and losing the round. That's the one that really bothers me, where they just let them grab the fence and do like little light warnings. And then the other things, right, like if a dude's standing still, like in the Herbert Burns fight, and he knees Julio Arce in the balls twice, I actually like that a point was taken there because it's a stationary target. If you're drilling the dude twice in the balls, even if it's not intentional, you should have a point taken. In situations like frantic exchanges, you graze the eye, you try to kick someone in the liver, you clip them in the cup. Those situations, I don't think you need to be super aggressive taking a point, but at some point, these fighters do have to be responsible for their weapons, and it should not become an advantage to be committing fouls. At this point in MMA, it is advantageous to grab the fence. It's advantageous to poke your opponent in the eye, to kick them in the balls, because there's rarely ever a repercussion for doing it. And even if there is a repercussion, 1 point, 1 point in a 5-round, 3-round fight, if you're committing enough fouls, you could still be coming out ahead with that. So those are some of the concerns here with the current state of refereeing. There's a lot of talk about the judges, and I think there's issues there also. I'm a big fan of open scoring, but that's a topic for another video. There's clearly a problem with the referees and just how they're being commissioned, how they're being taught, right? There's just not a lot of consistency. So those are my thoughts on that. Kind of went on for a while rambling, but how are you guys feeling about the current state of MMA referees? Do you agree with some of the issues that I brought up? Let me know down below. But thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.